What is a safe amount of screen time for toddlers, young children, and teenagers? We explore the question with a pediatric mental health expert. You're listening to the 2025 EMF Hazard Summit. My name is Nick Pinault, the EMF guy, and this is the EMF Hazard Summit. Protect your children. In this presentation, Dr. Roseann Capanna-Hodge teaches us how to think about screen time as parents. We dive deep into the amount of screen time that is linked with mental health issues and share ideas on how to help the entire family develop a healthier relationship with tech. As a trailblazer in mental health, media figure, and the founder of Dr. Roseann LLC Neurotastic Brain Formulas and the Global Institute of Children's Mental Health, Dr. Roseann embodies the mission of changing the way we view and treat children's mental health. She is lauded for her teachings on dysregulation and how to promote self-regulation using science-driven solutions, which in turn cultivates a happier family environment and propels a progressive shift in children's mental health. I'm here today with Dr. Roseann Capanna-Hodge. Have I pronounced your name right?
You totally have.
Okay, great start. Well, you're an expert on many topics, but what I wanted to focus, this is EMF hazards. The hazards of technology in my mind go beyond just the wireless radiation that can be emitted by a tablet. Because in my mind, if you hand a tablet to a child, there's no radiation whatsoever, it still could become a hazard if we let the child play with that all day, every day. I saw it in my child. I have a 6-year-old, Elliot, and if he watches more than around 60 minutes of TV, there comes a time where we stop the TV and now he's angry at something. You know, he becomes zombified and then it becomes almost, more prone to anger or different emotions that are a little bit uncharacteristic for him. So let's start the conversation there. What do you think is the mental health impact of screen time in kids and teenagers?
Yeah. I mean, there's a huge mental health impact, and there's a lot to unpack there because it's not as simple as just too much screen time. It's also about what kind of screen time are you using? And, and for parents, just like you shared about your son, it is actually one of the most common things that parents want to talk to me about. I would say it's screen time. It is picky eating. Yeah. And it is actually just managing dysregulated behaviors, which often happen from the previous two, right? And so, with screen time, I think that there is a cultural shift. You can see it when you go out where people are using screens as babysitters. And that's not to shame any parent. They're going out and they want to eat dinner and they plop their iPhone up against a cup while everybody's eating, right? So what's happening is we have very, very young children who do not know how to self-regulate without screens. And that is a major, major driver as to why kids become so angry, so dysregulated, and on the other side, maybe even withdrawn from too much screen time, right? And so the basis of it is not that screen time is bad, it's that it's being done at a level where they're not really doing play. And, all kids need to play, and even teenagers, they need some downtime that isn't related to screens, right? So could it be, we don't have screens during the week at our house. I have teens, it's not always popular.
I bet. Wow.
And luckily we have a group of other parents where they don't have it either. So it's not like they're missing out. But, the average child is spending a minimum of 7.25 hours a day on their computer.
How much? Can you repeat that? Sorry.
7.25 hours.
It's like a full-time job.
Screen.
My God.
And, some of that, right? So even in school, right, we're even moving away from textbooks and kids are on their devices. And,
Yeah.
and then it's another level of being, having, blue light or having disruption. And then, kids have devices, teens have devices in their room, and then they're staying up on it. So when we talk about it, right, what is actually happening? So they don't know how to self-regulate without it. Their sleep is being impacted. Um, and, then we're creating a whole generation of kids that don't know what to do when there's not a screen there, right? They're bored. I think we saw that in the early part of the pandemic. Parents were like, I just played. And it's like, wait a second. You can't just say, oh, here, go figure out and go play with something when your child has been used to only being on devices. You have to actually set up play. You might have to engage with them. You might have to actually play a card game with your teenager or take them for a walk. So that part of it is a big driver, Nicholas, as to what happens, let alone we can talk about what happens when you try to get your kid off a device.
Yeah. Before we do that, I'm wondering what the actual guidelines are. Let's take USA, because a lot of people listening to this, probably 80% will come from the US, but I know they vary from country to country. What is currently the research around a healthy amount of screen time, maybe per certain age trenches? I know that, if I recall correctly, before 5 years old, it's almost nothing for the American Academy for Pediatrics. Is this correct?
That is correct. So a lot of our research actually is still based on television and not on devices.
Okay.
So, but for very young children, like children under 2, I think they didn't even recommend it at all. Now we have things like Coco Lemon, where kids are watching. I don't know if your kids want Coco.
Yeah, I know what that is.
You know what it is? It's
Yeah.
like crack. They say they can't even get these kids off of it because then they start freaking out, but it's very addictive. It's highly, designed. But what are the actual screen times? I mean, what used to be was no more than 2 hours in a day, right? That is just not happening. I mean, there are certain age groups, I believe it's 10-year-olds, 10 to 12-year-olds, they're actually spending over 10 hours a day on devices. I mean, they're just on their devices all the time. And, there's this whole battle, right? That what sort of happened in the pandemic is play with other kids shifted to gameplay with peers. So parents feel guilty because they are like, well, at least they're playing with the other kids, And in America, depending on where you live, families are busy. So we don't necessarily have neighborhoods like when I grew up where you could actually play, right? You remember, when I was little, it was like my mom would be like, just be home before it's dark, and she didn't, we were out in a mob. That doesn't happen a lot anymore. I work with people all over the world, but a lot of people in different states in the United States, and I rarely hear neighborhood play. And so then that parents feel guilty and they want their kids to, have interaction. But I think with anything, it's balance. So your question is a great one. What is the right amount of time? Now, I have 2 different kinds of kids. Both my kids are neurodivergent. I have one kid who is much more regulated and he can handle certain amounts of time. Now, I have another one where even short amount of time can dysregulate him and he becomes very inattentive. So, some people get hyper, some people get really fatigued. The research says that 20 minutes on a device, not television, right, that's far from you, after 20 minutes, the brain moves into an under or overstimulated state. That's it, 20 minutes. So what then happens is people try to, they let their kids be on a device, whatever amount of time, doesn't matter at that point. Anytime after 20 minutes, you then ask your child to do something, empty the dishwasher, do their homework. This is where the trouble happens because they can't shift gears. There's no transition. And most parents think, well, I'm telling them and they should just do it. But their brain, their nervous system isn't ready to shift. And so we need to educate parents on how to manage devices. Number one, setting a boundary and sticking to it. the parents.
Yeah.
Right. Because it's pretty easy when your kid is quiet. And, you and I, we work from home a lot. Right. And so sometimes we need our kids to be quiet and we put them on our devices. I mean, this is not anything that isn't there, but we need to have clear boundaries. And then what's the expectation after? And then helping them to transition with some type of physical activity is the best thing. I don't even care if it's like they're getting up and they're getting a glass of water. They're chewing crunchy snacks, or if you're lucky enough to have little kids where you're making them do jumping jacks or some type of sensory activity. That's how to break the cycle of the reactivity.
To kind of wake them up from the zombification, something like that. Well,
absolutely. And it's also a shift. It's a transition, like their brain is getting so stimulated, Nicholas, by devices, right? I mean, if they're on games, these are activities are, designed. They even have organizational psychologists or part of these companies to make your kids get super addicted, right? Roblox, Minecraft. I mean, this is the language of kids, Fortnite. All kinds of kids play it. It's pretty rare you don't meet kids who do some level of gaming.
I know, and I still play video games. When I look back at my teenage years, it's clear that I played too much. At the time, I would have told you, no, I didn't play enough. But now, as an adult, I'm 37. I look back and I say, maybe I missed out on some social skills, definitely on sleep, and I did have also playtime as a teen with my friends in person. So that was very valuable. I can only imagine how I would have felt if all the time that I got with them in person would have been replaced with just video games. Eventually, you do become crazy, or this sort of, for me, it was a sort of depression almost, like nothing stimulates you anymore. So you switch to a different game. And then eventually everything becomes bland, and then you look outside and you don't know what time it is. You do become a bit like a vampire. So that's my example from my own life. I know for my son is different, and we try to have clear boundaries. Sometimes we're not that good on that during the weekend, and it does show, because the kid, if I realize if I just say, Elliot, turn off the TV, and then I expect him to just, oh yes, Dad, and won't happen. If I tell him that in a few minutes, kind of pre-frame that we're going to stop in a few minutes, it's more gentle. But he's 6, so maybe at 8, that won't work anymore. So the transition idea to just do something else physical is a pretty good idea. I think it's a good idea for adults too, because
it's a great idea for adults too.
Yeah, when I'm in front of the computer, I do become zombified after a few hours, and I'm like, what is life, right? I kind of look around, even doing interviews like these, even if it's something active, after a while, I'm like, wait a minute, where are my bearings? Like, what is real life? Because I'm just staring at a screen. I think that's just the nature of technology. So,
and also just sitting. I mean, sitting for this long, I mean, it's a hard thing. And I want to say this, like, for your son, is this still going to work at age 8? I'm going to tell you yes, because the problem that happens with parents is, again, no shaming, just understanding, right? When we know better, we can do better.
Yeah.
It's that the learning, the more consistent you are, the more likely it's going to happen, right? So a lot of times parents will stop doing something because they're like, well, it's working. And then kids fall back on whatever it is, gaming or, doing chores. I think all kids should do chores. There was a big study showing that kids that do chores are much more successful in life. And that's because they're able to do something independently and complete it. And then the brain recognizes it. But when we are consistent, right? And we're not talking perfect. I always talk about 80%. That's what you aim for, an 80, right? Mm-hmm. So you get a pass here and there, right? But it helps the kids. It provides the framework for them for other things. They know consistency is important, but you're right to recognize you can't just tell your kid, turn off the TV right now, because their nervous system is so hooked in. You're almost inviting
Yeah.
a reaction because it's
Oh
like a
yeah.
startle. And some of the things that I do, like even with my younger teen, I make him set up a timer on the microwave, and he's got to which we don't use, but it's still there. And he sets a timer on, and I said, "Hey, listen, you have to get up and turn the timer off, and that means you have under 10 minutes to come off of that. And if you don't come off of that, you don't get it the next day." Now, I have to follow up on what I'm doing.
Oh
So
yeah.
when he doesn't do it, he doesn't get it the next day. And we've had some times where he's none too happy with me, but this is consistently working because I am being consistent.
Yeah, I've had the same experience. At 6 years old, I feel like Elliot is already able to understand that if he fails to follow the guidelines we talked about and our agreement, for example, when he's doing his routine at night, he loves to listen to songs on my phone. It's not the healthiest thing. I'm thinking about the EMFs. I don't have a way to wire it up because it's in the bathroom. So I do put it a little bit further away. I don't want him to hold the device and things like that. So I'm guilty here. A lot of people are going to write, Nick, the EMF guy, it's for a few minutes, but he loves that. But I discovered that when he closes the door and does his own routine, which is very good, he's becoming independent. He was tempted to look at the screen because there's, of course, the video. And then he was staring at the screen and forgetting about everything else. So after a few minutes, I come here and he's like hiding the device. And he's like, no, I didn't watch it. And I said, Elliot, we told you it's just to listen to songs. And we had at one point to say, well, there's not going to be any songs for a week. And we've done that a few times this year. And now I feel like he thinks about the consequence, and he's more disciplined, and he understands that if he looks at the screen, and we said that this is not screen time, it's just to listen to a song, then he knows that he's gonna lose that privilege, and he's becoming more mature about it already at 6. So I'm pretty proud that we had it was kind of painful to apply and to verify and to discipline. It's a long shot as a parent.
But
you
it's
don't
a
know.
natural consequence, right? And
well, exactly.
And it's a good one. And sometimes it feels harder as parents to actually, say no, but it's only hard for a small amount of time. It's when you let things, you're passive and you let things happen, right? It's your child's brain is saying, I always say it's like a raptor, that like in Jurassic Park when it realized what it could get through, like, so it looks for the weakness. And your kids never do things on purpose, even when you really think like, oh, they're lying, they're doing it on purpose. This is just developmental stuff that their brain tries to do, right?
Yeah.
And so we can't personalize the behavior. Instead, we really have to look at everything as a learning opportunity. These are all opportunities for them to become great independent decision makers when we're not around. And so by having healthy boundaries, natural consequences, kids do really well in life in so many areas,
And do you have specific examples of strategies that you've seen be more effective than others? Let's talk specifically about screen time control. I've heard about apps. I've heard about, certain policies at home, and put the phones in a stack on the kitchen table before going to bed. Also, even one parent told me, I don't know if that's too extreme, you tell me, but they lock the phones on the kitchen table at night because maybe this is what it took. And I think the person who told me had 4 teenagers at the same time in the household, and they were always, sneaking up in the middle of the night and things. She said, okay, well, now it's under lock and I have the key under my pillow. Try to beat me. So I found that extreme, but who knows? I don't have 4 teenagers at home. So who am I to judge? So what do you think about these ideas, and what ideas do you see create a healthy result in the household?
I mean, such a great question because, first of all, I want to honor the fact that we are really moving to a neurodivergent society, right? So, in about 7 years, 50% of births in America will be a child with autism. And so when you have all of these, differences in brain, clinical mental health issues across the globe are really high. 14% of adolescents across the world have a diagnosed or diagnosable mental health issue. 14%. I mean, in the US, it's much, much higher than that. So, so with that being said, when kids have influences and many things can dysregulate your nervous system, including EMFs, poor food, lack of sleep, poor parenting, all kinds of things, right? So some kids are just better at regulating in and of themselves. They come out that way, right? My younger son came out like a 57-year-old. I mean, people will say to me Jace Giancarlo is like a 57-year-old. I'm like, I swear I had nothing to do with that. It just happened, right? And so temperament is a part of that, your astrological sign, all kinds of things are a part of it. So some kids need more boundaries. And the number one thing parents can do is having clear, consistent boundaries, right? So what is that, right? So that's not just, doing what you say. It's also role modeling what the behavior you want to see from your child, right? I always say you can't yell at your kid to stop yelling.
Yeah.
Right? You have to show them what you want. And that means that you have to be regulated. You have to be responsible with your devices. You can't be on it the whole time and then expect your child to not be on theirs. Right. Mm-hmm. And I understand there's a blurry line with work. I get it. And this is increasingly so. I think that's part of it. Now, with that being said, right, I am a fan of devices that limit Wi-Fi time. I find that to be the most effective one because you say, here's your time. You can take it. You can earn it. This is what you've budgeted for. I also like kids to have tasks, real tasks, real chores at home, like emptying the garbage, the dishwasher, where they can earn more time. I think that is really helpful and helps them to understand that there is, this is the way the world works. You do, and you can earn, right? And it breaks the cycle, the nag cycle. Can I have more time? Can I have more time? So instead, like in my house, I say, well, what chores are you going to do? Now, my kids got to the point where they came to me and said, I'm going to empty the dishwasher. I'm going to do this. I'm going to do this. How much time can I get? Okay, great. Fine. And then, then you have your management system. And then on top of that, let's be honest, I have personally had kids. Now I'm a psychologist, I'm a mental health professional working with kids all over the world, families. I've had kids who literally crawled out their window, went across on the roof and went into their parents' room. So I've seen some real extreme things to have access to devices. So if that's what you're doing and everybody's device gets locked up, everybody's device gets locked up. Don't do it for the one kid. Do it for everybody. Just be consistent across the board. Mm-hmm. I think good communication is a part of this too. I like to say man, I feel super jacked up by yesterday. I was meetings all day, right? And I wasn't even under lights, but I was on Zoom all day, 6:30 p.m. And I was like, I am done. And I came down and I said, I can't be in front of any device. I feel super jacked up. I'm going to do this. And then I'm going to go take a bath, and I let my kid know, it even impacts me, and I think those are good conversations too.
Yeah. I feel like at 6-year-old, but maybe at 5, he wouldn't have understood, but somehow there's this shift. I feel like at 6, he's starting to get it. And I do tell him, after a while, here's how you could feel in front of the TV. And he kind of knows now. He kind of understands, oh, I feel so fatigued. And I tell him, well, yeah, when I spend too much time in front of the TV, I feel fatigued too.
Yeah.
That's kind of something expected if you sit in one place, do nothing, and stare at at a wall, at a moving wall, and your kind of brain goes dizzy. So yeah, that's a great way to frame it. Being honest with your kids.
Being honest,
I
I
found
think
that to
it's
be
always good.
effective. Yeah.
For sure. And they think everything's easy for us, and it's just not, and I know personally, everybody always wants to have a Zoom chat. And I'm like, can we just do a phone call? Like, it gets to be a bit much, all of this intensity, on there. And kids, I think today, the other part about screen time, the type of screen time, the type of whatever you're doing on media does make a difference in the research, right? So the more passive it is, scrolling, watching, YouTube, things like that, the more it's tied to negative mental health consequences. Where if it's interactive, you're playing with your friends on a server, it's actually tied to positive mental health, which is surprising. Now, obviously, you can't be on there 7 hours. I mean, but kids are on their devices literally like more than they're at school.
Yeah, I feel like, unfortunately, the design of these softwares, including, I say software, it could be, social media, the way Instagram has changed in the years. And I guess I'm a young guy, but I'm still old school in that sense. I remember when Instagram was not like infinite scrolling. I don't recall what it was. It feels like everything is infinite scrolling at this point.
Mm-hmm.
Facebook, you scroll, and when you think, oh, I have seen it all. No, there's more. So you can literally get lost in, lose track of time. Netflix is like, okay, I've seen all these shows. Wait a minute, there's infinite amount of new shows, and then autoplay, right? These features that make you go, okay, oh yeah, I gotta go to my friend's house. I'm gonna be late, and then all of a sudden there's a new trailer playing. You're like, oh well, that looks interesting, and you stand there not for 1 minute, not for two. It's like 17 minutes, and you're like, oh, all these shows are super interesting. Wait a minute, I'm even more late. That can even catch me sometimes, and I'm like, well, this is, I mean, this is evil.
I mean, think about it. You're an adult and you can get sucked in, and that's why
sucked
kids
in big time.
Yeah, and their body just has these nervous system reactions. And so, if we can help them by putting that container of the boundaries, being consistent, and then really giving them a transitional activity. And I do love a countdown. It's just you can't do countdown again and again and again, because that defeats the purpose, right? And if kids have explosions and they react, that's okay, right? Now, if it's a consistent thing where they're always reacting, then you got to really think, what's going on here? Is this really about this device? Is there other things going on? Maybe they can't handle it. Maybe their nervous system is too sensitive for device usage. I think the biggest thing becomes you just worry about the social consequences once kids get a little older, 10 and up. There's just a lot of gameplay occurring together.
Yeah. And have you seen situations, that's my last point is, maybe have you seen extreme examples where you have to go on a fast? You have to stop all screen time for a certain amount of time. I've seen that recommended in different books.
With my own kids, where I'm like, this is getting a little janky. Like you're getting a little too jacked up. Absolute digital detoxes. I don't think they're a bad idea. We go on vacation. I'm like, you're not bringing your computer. And then my kids will say, well, are you bringing your computer? And sometimes, honestly, we're going away in a few weeks to the DR. I gotta do a live. Otherwise I wouldn't bring my computer, but that's it. So, but they're not bringing theirs. How about that?
Yeah. And I've heard that for some younger kids that have not necessarily learning disabilities, but specific tantrums associated with tech, sometimes cutting it all together for a few weeks can really help them reset. But it has, I think a plan has to be in place. Instead of improvising in those cases, kind of working.
And you can't, again, if a kid is struggling with that, you can't expect them to regulate doing artwork or Legos or whatever, you're going to have to set them up. You're going to have to help them transition. I think that's the part, again, like I said, we were out roaming the streets in the 70s and 80s, right? But that just isn't the way today. I think we know too much and kids don't have the same kind of freedoms that we potentially did. And so how can you set up a room for access younger kids for the activities and older kids, right? And it might mean you have to make some changes in your schedule to spend more time with your kids too.
That's great. Yeah, I'm very fortunate to have spent the first 4 years with Elliot, almost half days as an entrepreneur, being able to, me and my wife, kind of exchange time with him and be the babysitters as parents. So you just take care of him. So it was precious time, and I think that this also helped forge a stronger bond. But even if you don't have that capability, I think that spending even sometimes 5 minutes of play with Elliot is something that he's gonna appreciate a lot. Like, I want to play Legos. No, it's not the time. And then he throws, I don't know, a tantrum. And I say, okay, 5 minutes. And he's like, yes, I got something. Yeah. I'm like, 5 minutes? Like, this is not enough. And yet that's important for him. And he just wants to spend time with me.
He wants to connect with you.
He wants to connect. Yeah.
Yeah. And you know what? I think sometimes we get so worked up, like as parents, we get worried. These kids have a lot on their plate in terms of learning. I mean, gosh, school is tough. And we forget how to be playful, right? Like having the music and dancing and singing and, doing all that stuff. I have teenagers. We do that stuff at our house all the time. And my husband and I are very playful kind of people. I don't really care what other people think, and so it's good. It's good to show your kids to not always be so serious because, my gosh, the world is so serious,
Yeah, 100%. And I know this summit, this online summit, even that I put out, is too serious at times. And I know it's a lot to take in, but I hope that at least is going to provide some guidance to parents around screen time and the fact that we need to learn better and evolve as parents. And unfortunately, I feel like the technology is evolving too fast, but we can learn these new skills that, I didn't even expect to have to learn as a parent, really. I did see that, okay, screen time is going to be a thing, but it's a whole new set of understanding that and knowledge that I have to acquire, or else something's going to happen with the kid. And I'll just be sorry later if I didn't at least have an overview of the issue and what can happen if you just let it go. If you just let it go, the devices are going to suck up their attention. That's how they're designed, right? So
totally
don't be passive about it, be active. And at the same time, I feel like sometimes, like you said, 80-20 is good, because there are just a few days where, okay, now don't say a word, go look at the screen, and I cannot take it anymore. And that's fine. That happened to me a few times, and I had to, to be gentle with myself, say, okay, that's fine. That's just one day.
We're not perfect.
Yeah, exactly.
Our kids aren't perfect either. And I think parents, they just had a big study in America. 41% of parents are so overwhelmed, they're almost immobilized in America. And so I think you brought up a point, like we talk in this summit, you're talking about a lot of different things, right? And ultimately, in the end, you need to do one thing and stick to it, right? And I think with devices, I think the number one thing I hope that people heard from this is setting clear boundaries and being as consistent as you possibly can about it. And just know that it's okay. Devices aren't terrible. And there's a lot of cool things out there, but it can't replace physical activity. It can't replace playing Legos, one of my all-time favorite toys, it can't replace artwork or cooking with you. So don't let it.
Well, that's a perfect end. And please share your links, website. Where can people learn more from you?
Yeah. Well, I'm Dr. Roseann everywhere. So Roseann, and you can go to drroseann.com. You can find me on, Pinterest, YouTube. Instagram and Facebook, but I'm pretty cool on Pinterest. If people are really looking for really amazing graphics, I'm super proud of my Pinterest account, if I do say so myself. And my podcast, It's Gonna Be Okay.
Okay, well, that's a perfect title. I love it. So I hope this is the message that parents take home in the end, that they can feel empowered. And yes, it's going to be okay. We don't, if we're in a freak out mode, we're not helping ourselves, and that's certainly not helping our kids. So take a deep breath and choose one action step from this, set clear boundaries, and it's going to be okay. Well, thank you so much for your presence, Dr. Roseann. It was really a very lovely conversation.
Thank you.
I really hope that you liked this presentation. If you want to take action on what you just heard, you'll find links to everything that was mentioned by our guest speaker right underneath this interview. If you love the summit and want to own the recordings in audio, video, and written form for all of these 2025 interviews, make sure to click the buttons on this page to get the 2025 EMF pack. This EMF pack is heavily discounted during the summit launch and for a very limited time. Remember that every purchase supports my work as an independent citizen journalist, as well as the nonprofit partners that are associated with this summit. Thank you for your attention and support, and I'll see you in the next presentation.